In this section, we're going to talk about sleep disorders. But before we do, I wanted to mention one brief other feature about sleep is that the circadian clock in your body also regulates your body temperature. It turns out that an individual's body temperature becomes reduced during sleep. It's in fact lowest during the nighttime and rises in the daytime. This fluctuation persists even when you don't fall asleep. This could also be a reason as to why some people report being able to sleep a little bit better in a cooler temperature room, because their body is already decreasing the temperature for them. Next, let's talk about sleep disorders. The first one that I want to mention is jet lag. Jet lag results from an inability of the circadian clock to make immediate adjustments to light changes, even though you may have flown halfway around the world. It does appear to be easier to adjust to a longer day than to a shorter day, making jet lag more difficult when you arrive and are expected to immediately fall asleep. It's a lot easier for the body to arrive in a location and stay awake for a much longer period of time. One of the ways to combat jet lag is to, of course, start to slowly adjust your internal clock before you leave on the trip. This includes not only staying awake, but also adding light and changing the time at which you eat your 3 important meals of the day. Another sleep disorder is what's referred to as Monday morning blues. This is when people complain about having an inability to wake up to their alarm clock or just having their mood being altered when they have to wake up early for work on Monday morning. This is a result of taking your circadian clock and essentially reprogramming it for a few days over the weekend. If you stay up much later on the weekend than you do during the typical weekday and sleep in, you are altering the timing of your circadian clock, making it more difficult to retrain your brain when you try to wake up for your typical hours again during the work week. The best solution, of course, is to pick a specific time at which you will always wake up Monday through Sunday, 7 days a week, and always go to sleep. A third disorder I'd like to discuss is the seasonal affective disorder, otherwise known as the acronym SAD. This disorder again affects your mood, and is a result of the change in seasons that autumn brings as a result of a loss of daylight in the winter season. Symptoms include decreased appetite, loss of concentration and focus, a lack of energy, feelings of depression and despair, and excessive sleepiness. Some people in northern latitudes are known to consume a lot of coffee in order to try to combat this, but effective treatment doesn't involve medicine, but in fact involves using light therapy. Purchasing lamps that emit natural wavelengths of light and turning them on early in the morning and leaving them on until 8 or so at night. Now, as we mentioned at the start of this lecture, sleep is a required part of life. It's required just like oxygen, food, and water. Why is sleep so important? We understand why oxygen is needed, why water is needed, why nutrients and calories are needed, but scientists are still struggling to understand what the function of sleep is. One of the things that have been investigated is what the function of dreaming is. Perhaps the function of sleep is so that we can dream. During an average night's sleep, only about 2 hours are spent dreaming, and most of these dreams occur during REM sleep. The source of the content of any given dream is unknown, and this is why it's generally not used by psychologists today. Brain regions that are inactive during dreaming include those that regulate intelligence, conscious thought, and higher order reasoning. Whereas some of the other regions of the brain that are active during sleep are involved in maintaining and retaining memories. The closest studies that we've gotten today to help us understand the importance of dreaming is to help us better determine which decisions for the day were good decisions and which of our decisions were poor decisions, helping us make better decisions in the future. Scientists still do not fully understand the importance of dreaming, though, and this is why many psychologists and neuroscientists tend to ignore the contents of dreams when talking with their patients about their sleep. Scientists still do not fully understand the other functions of sleep. Perhaps dreaming is just a side effect of sleep and not actually relevant. So many scientists are still trying to understand why sleep is essential for survival. They've actually found through scientific studies with lab rats that rats that were deprived of REM sleep survive an average of only 5 months, whereas rats deprived of all sleep survive only about 3 weeks, meaning sleep is essentially just as important as food, although not quite as important as water and oxygen. So it is essential for survival. And we've seen that there are some negative health implications, not just in laboratory animals, but also in humans. In humans, extreme sleep deprivation can lead to paranoia and hallucinations, including some brain damage that lasts a lifetime. So why is sleep so necessary? There are 3 main hypotheses as to why sleep is necessary. Not to imply that one of these is correct, perhaps all 3 of them are correct. But I'm going to present them to you in order of the hypotheses that are least supported to the hypothesis that is most supported with scientific evidence. So the first hypothesis that does have some scientific evidence is that sleep is necessary for restoration and recovery of body systems. There is a little evidence that more repair and more restoration occurs during sleep. People that don't get enough sleep tend to get sick more frequently, and also injured muscle and bone takes a lot longer to heal. This is part of the reason why some hospitals will put patients into an induced coma to force them to sleep, hoping that their body will allow themselves to repair a little while during sleep. However, some studies have shown that whole body protein synthesis decreases during sleep, indicating that sleep is perhaps more important for a dormant state than it is for repair. That leads us to our second hypothesis, which has a little bit more support, and that is for energy conservation. Many scientists argue that part of the reason why we sleep is to slow our metabolic rate. This is evidenced as what we talked about before by the fact that our body temperatures are actually decreased during sleep, requiring fewer calories on our part to stay alive. In REM and NREM sleep, these phases are only found in warm-blooded animals that are required to burn a lot of calories in order to just maintain a specific warm body temperature. Species that are larger tend to have greater sleep times and a higher core body temperature with more metabolism, indicating that, again, this might be for energy conservation. In addition, infectious diseases tend to make us feel sleepy. Perhaps that's our body's way of telling our brain that instead of staying awake, we should be using some energy to fight the infectious disease and just go to sleep. Here's a fun little chart showing you the different sleep times in different organisms. And as you can see, some of those organisms that are really small do tend to have longer sleep times than organisms that are much bigger, like a horse and a giraffe. This general trend does support the energy conservation hypothesis. But there is one more hypothesis that has even more evidence than any of the first two. The hypothesis that has the most support for the reason why we need to sleep is memory consolidation. There have been a number of studies that have indicated that sleeping reinforces learning and memory, while at the same time helping us to forget unneeded or unnecessary memories. According to this hypothesis, what happens during sleep is your brain sorts through all of the memories throughout the day and determines which memories are associated with strong emotions and release of hormones, and which memories were not associated with strong emotions and release of hormones. So for instance, you may not remember what you ate for breakfast or lunch yesterday or last week, but if you had a really good meal or a good meal with a good friend, you may remember what that food was. People who get plenty of deep NREM sleep in the first half of the night and REM sleep in the second half of the night have shown that they improve their ability to perform spatial tasks and remember important things from the preceding day. This suggests a full night's sleep is important for playing a role in memory and learning. Something to keep in mind as you're in school and need to retain information for exams. As you can see from this data here, sleep is found in mammals, birds, and reptiles. Although sleep patterns, habits, postures, and places of sleep vary greatly. For instance, birds do not lose muscle tone during REM sleep. It's a good thing since they are often sleeping while standing or perching on a tree or lamppost. And if they lose muscle tone, like we do, they could fall and die. Most scientific studies have failed to demonstrate any REM sleep in reptiles, so they appear to be in NREM sleep exclusively. This indicates possibly that REM sleep might be a later evolutionary development in warm-blooded animals only. Small mammals, as we mentioned before, tend to sleep more than larger ones. There's also such a thing as unihemispheric sleep. This is when one side of the brain sleeps while the other side remains awake. This is observed in birds, especially those that make long transoceanic flights or migrations, where they need to be partially awake for days on end in order to adjust their wings and continue to remain aloft. Unihemispheric sleep is also commonly found in aquatic mammals, like dolphins and porpoises, that allow them to swim and surface to take a breath every so often. In our last section of the class, we're going to be talking about sleep disorders, the most common of which are obstructive sleep apnea, insomnia, narcolepsy, and restless leg syndrome.